Good morning, everyone. I'm Aparna Prabhakar, Vice President at IBM, and I'm responsible for creating and delivering quantum ecosystem at IBM. And when we start talking about any technology, I truly believe that you need to start with why. Why this technology? Why does it matter? Why should I even care? And in today's conversation here, I wanted to start with my whys of why quantum. And to me, it's very simple. This is planet Earth, our planet, and we have huge problems. Think about it. We have to feed growing populations, tackle climate change, address volatile economies, and really counter those emerging diseases. And this just scratches the surface of the problems that exist out there. And one of the reasons why we can't address it today is because the computational need required to actually tackle these problems is actually really, really hard, and classical just can't solve it. But when you see these problems through a lens of science, these impossible problems actually become possible. Think about this. With better molecular simulation, you could discover new materials to capture carbon much better. You could create more efficient fertilizers much more quickly. If you could do more complex calculation on structured data, then you can better manage these finance problems and get drugs to people faster. And this is where quantum computing comes in. That is the impact of quantum computing we are speaking about. And before we go any further, let me make one thing very clear. We cannot do this today with today's quantum computer. But that is the vision which we are working towards. That is why quantum is interesting, and that is why you should be looking at it. Now, let's make it a little bit more real. Let's talk about how does this actually work? So when you look at quantum computer, it actually draws on fundamental laws of nature or quantum mechanics to carry out calculations using quantum bits, or as we call it, qubits. So think about this way. In classical, you have bits, 0 and 1. On quantum, the qubits are actually a complex mix of zeros and ones. What that does is it explodes exponentially your compute space, and it allows you to do calculations which are really complex today. And then when you look at this picture, let's get a little bit, they say picture is worth 1,000 words. At the center is the set of problems which are addressable by classical today, right at the heart of it. The pink area is address the problems which we know of today, which we cannot address with classical computing. And the blue are the problems which we know quantum in its maturity can solve. And these are problems on simulating molecule, factoring, unstructured data, etc. And what I want you to see is that blue kind of expands out from the problems we know. So there are problems we know of which quantum can solve, and there are going to be new problems which we will learn about as we go down this journey. Now, there are two questions which are important we should get straight. The most common questions which are often asked to me. The first question is quantum going to replace classical? And the answer is no, we are not replacing classical. We're going to work alongside classical. It's an extension of the toolkit which you will have today for that future. And the second question is it a new way of computing? And the answer is yes, this is a fundamentally new way of computing. You're computing with qubits. Now that we have looked at why quantum, those of you who are saying, well, great, big world problems, but why is it relevant to me? What does it mean to my industry? And I'm going to actually lean on some of the analysts. And IDC in 2021 put this 8 areas where, and the use cases where quantum will be relevant. Interestingly, today I have the world's largest quantum ecosystem at IBM Quantum. And what we see is these industries pretty much map to the movement in our ecosystem. And for those who are more number-oriented, this kind of brings in a little bit more numerics into it. By 2027, IDC predicts that the customers will spend $8.6 billion on quantum. And this is value capture. We are not talking about value creation. What is the value quantum will unlock will be tens and thousands of times more than what is possible to capture. And if you have your favorite analyst, I know many of you do, Gartner says, hey, the time to actually talk about this is right now. And here's the way they talk about it. Start small, explore broadly, learn from the ecosystem, because when you're in a nascent technology like quantum, you actually need to know what not to do as well as what to do. And that is the collaborative nature of the industry right now. Now, that brings us to why now? Why are we even having this conversation today? And that means you need to evaluate what is the progress quantum computing as a technology has had so far. And to do so, and to separate hype from reality, I'm actually going to do this with IBM's lens. Here's the reason why. So we actually we have a largest share in the market, and I think it's helpful for you to kind of evaluate what we are doing and saying, okay, I understand how progress is happening, and it makes it much more tangible. Now, whenever I talk about what we are doing at IBM, I always want to start with our mission statement, not just because it's core of what we do, but as you're thinking about quantum, it has to be core of what you look for as well. And let me explain. Our mission is pretty simple. We at IBM want to bring useful quantum computing to the world and make the world quantum safe. Today I'm going to speak only about quantum computing part, but the key word here being useful. That is what this is all about. And how do you make it useful? You do it by having a really strong point of view. You do it by having, in our case, a strong development roadmap. Now, just for clarity, when we put this up in 2019, and that roadmap went only till 2023, people looked at us and said, you guys are crazy. This is so aggressive. You will never be able to do this. Since then, we've not only met all our milestones, but we've actually beaten it and expanded our roadmap this year to actually go to tens and thousands of qubit. Now, as you're looking at industry, here's what I want you to think about. You always want to look at how is the hardware progressing, right? That's the bottom of this roadmap, which says relevant progression. But hardware by itself, people talk a lot about qubits. Hey, we have 100 plus qubits, we have 1,000 plus qubits, etc. But that by itself is not enough. You really need to think about what is the quality of those qubits? What is the performance of those qubits? Because if you don't have quality, it's actually not that useful. And the third parameter, how fast can this go? And these three together are actually your metrics. Doesn't matter who you're looking at, you should be looking at. And What I want you to think about is this is not just hardware, but it's equivalent of middleware, algorithms, and applications. And we are consciously partnering front and center on quantum today. The reason is we know how to build our hardware. We don't actually understand all the use cases completely. And this is where people like you come in and talk about, here's my problem statement. Here's what I can't do. Let's pull in these tools and capabilities and apply it. When you think about quantum, I want you to think about it in 3 phases as an industry. Phase 1, which is where we were until recently, was all about adoption. How do I get this to more people? How do I look at getting access? What does cloud-based quantum computing actually mean? Phase 2, which I would argue is the phase we are entering into, is going to be about utility. How do we make sure quantum is useful? How do we establish an industry around it? Because I think there's a very famous saying which says, if you're here now, you're already late. And that's what this building industry is. You're getting the industry ready so that when quantum is there, industry is ready to take the advantage. And phase 3 is that scale parameter. Today we'll go through each of these phases in a little bit of detail so that you understand how we are thinking about it. So in 2016, IBM put its first quantum computer on cloud, 5 qubits. It was the latest and greatest, and we made a strategic decision to make it available for free to everybody. Here was the reason. We wanted to actually know, did people care? Did people use? How do they use? What do they do? And it was an amazing decision. Why? Because today the numbers speak for itself. Today I have 500,000 users who are using IBM Quantum. We have, on an average day, 4 billion executions on our systems per day. We have 26 systems which are online today for you to use, and over 200 members on the quantum ecosystem. And I want to draw your attention to this beautiful picture on the slide. This is the picture of an IBM System 1 in Cleveland Clinic. We inaugurated this April this year, and what's interesting about this system is it's actually smack in middle of their cafeteria. Think about this. A standalone system, people are eating their food, they are going around, and they can see the system. Think about the technology progress we've made it. Like, how far has the technology come that you can have a 127 qubit system standing alone, and it is literally the world's coolest place inside that system. Like, it's cooler than space inside that system, and you have all the electronics, everything working, isolated in there, and it's completely dedicated to healthcare. And that kind of indicates how far this technology has come from 2016, when putting a 5-qubit machine was considered craziness. And this also, it's one of my favorite pictures. This actually, I like, because when you look at that world map, what you see over here is the fact that this is not a US only story. This is a world story which we are seeing. The adoption is really going at the world scale. And the areas where you see no activity is areas where we have chosen that we don't engage in, just so that you understand. The people in Africa, Australia, Latin America who are actively using these systems and exploring and experimenting with it. Now that we've reached what I would call an exponential growth in adoption, that is where we get to this next stage, phase 2, which is what I believe we are in today. And the phase 2 is about establishing utility. On June 14th this year, that's a week ago, the work done by our scientists actually made it to the cover of Nature. And for those of you who are not technical, that's almost like getting an Oscar. And this is what you would call is a breakthrough milestone. Why? The experiment done by our scientists showed for the first time ever, quantum beat classical. The computer scientists in Berkeley have been trying to beat the results for last few months. Of course, it's game on for classical, by the way, so I expect that this result will get beaten, but it is the first proof point that this is not theory, this is real. And this is what we call entering into the era of quantum advantage. We are a little bit further away from advantage because advantage means not only a proof point that quantum is better than classical, but also a useful use case where quantum is better than classical. And that's where you as a community can engage, because you can take that to that next level of what are the useful use cases. And this is why building and seeding that industry becomes so important right now. And this is how we are building our industry. We have 4 pillars within our ecosystem we drive. The first pillar is about advancing quantum. What does that mean? Our open source platform, the world's biggest open source platform on quantum, is available widely. We still have systems available to a huge community which is using on open source. We have technical working groups which are looking at application areas. This is not IBM-led, it's actually partner-led. Then I have strategically placed quantum innovation centers. These are about 36 worldwide, which are acting as hubs for research and development, education and workforce, and creating the industry. And we have over industries, enterprises who are engaging with us, exploring use cases. And then last not the least is service integrations, and we'll talk a little bit about these. These numbers sort of speak for itself. We have over 2,000 papers which have been published by our ecosystem. And in a technology which is still nascent, that's actually a really good indicator of work being done, because this is not IBM published papers, these are partner published papers, important distinction. We have 36 quantum innovation centers. I have some in Japan, Korea, Europe, Australia, India, and of course US and Canada. And the governments are engaging in a very heavy way. Just so that you understand how fast we are growing, I made this slide a week and a half ago, and I said 24 clients. I have 26 industry clients with us. Credit Mutuel, which is a French bank, just signed a multi-year deal with us to actually explore finance for finance use cases. And not only are those clients working with us directly, there are 30 plus clients who are working with our QICs, not directly with IBM, but working with their QICs. And I have 40 startups, and startups we are actually very, very high bar. Last year we had about 20 startups apply for our ecosystem. 2 of them got invited to join our ecosystem. So we do have a high bar for the startups. And then 10 plus ISVs who we've hand selected, and we are looking at, you have a roadmap. 4 years down the lane, your next generation is coming. How do we integrate quantum? And let's make this a little bit more real. Let's talk about a few areas. Let's talk about healthcare. And in these last few years, if anything is proven, it is that the challenges in life science and healthcare demand a radically ambitious approach. We need to really accelerate the synthesis of new molecules and create a solid pipeline of molecular entities. And just take a second to think about current state. It takes 15 years for a drug to come to commercialization, and it costs about $3 billion. And I think I'm underestimating it. There are about 10 raised to power 60 pharmaceutically active molecules, and only 0.0000 dash 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 0.0000, you get the idea, 1% of those molecules have actually been explored. Think about it. And this molecular comparison is actually a very critical part of your design and discovery in drugs. And as you think about this, the reason why you can't do it is because you just don't have the computational power. And quantum, I'm sorry to repeat that again and again, follows the laws of nature. So it is actually very, very well suited to actually do some of these drug discovery kind of elements, right? Especially in the areas, particular drugs whose mode of action is through chemical reaction. The next one, which I want to bring your attention, is to high performance computing. And over the last 2 days, you've heard a lot about AI. You heard a lot that our data complexity is increasing. And that means that your HPC workloads will actually require additional resources. And it's important that quantum doesn't create this net new workflows, but gets integrated. And that's where our partners like Poznan Supercomputing and Networking Center is leading the thought process around HPC. At a national scale, they are looking and they are seeing how do we embed quantum within the HPC resources which exist today. This is actively happening as of today. Then of course, finance. Finance has a long, long history of complex quantitative analysis that inform decisions. Things like estimating credit worthiness, pricing, thinking about simulating risk across the entire financial thing. And quantum computing does have the potential to actually accelerate those, and in terms of both accuracy and speed. And the other thing about financial industry is it's very, very competitive. It's actually really bad to be the first follower. You can't be a follower, you have to be in front, because the IP being right there can make difference in millions, if not billions. And that is why you have a lot of the finance companies who working alongside and exploring quantum for finance. And last but not the least is the utility. And this is not everything, but I just wanted to give you an idea and trigger thought, because we spend so much time talking about explosion of data, emergence of AI, but energy footprint and demands are also increasing immensely. And energy is not really free at all, in spite of what we may think. So the rate at we are going, in fact, it shows that we don't have enough energy to be able to handle all of those things. E.ON is a great example. They've actually published reasonably good, pretty good papers. I wouldn't say reasonably good, very good papers, which actually goes and looks at this energy demand. Then comes the phase 3, establishing quantum at scale. And this is the next phase after the utility has been established. So it's a few years down the way, but it's a few years, we are already starting to plan about. And what we look at is quantum-centric supercomputing. So we are saying, to be useful, quantum has to be modular. It has to be flexible. It has to have the right things so that you can actually utilize quantum without needing to know the physics behind quantum. Make it easy, make it simple, and get it to that level of maturity where it will do. What you see, the rendering over there, is our system 2, which is modular in nature physically, but has also got all of the components on the software stack. It will come out on December 2nd. We have our summit, IBM Quantum Summit, which happens. So we are targeting to unveil at that point our first system 2, but that's the vision we have. And this is how that quantum-centric supercomputing will look. And it's, if you look at this, it has classical quantum data center, etc. together. A few years ago, nobody would be able to say this with a straight face. The fact that we are actually planning and designing for it tells you how fast this has accelerated. And for those, like, okay, why should I care? The answer is simple. You, as a user, need more tools in your toolbox. If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And what we really are doing here with the problems increasing in complexity is really building those tools and capabilities which add to your toolkit and which allow you to address problems in a holistic way. If you're working on quantum, the idea is you're sitting, you're looking at your workflows, you identify, you don't have to do anything, everything is done behind. It identifies which workflows are suitable for accelerator or GPU, which workflows are right for quantum. It processes there, comes back, knits it all together, and from a user-centric point of view, it's seamless. And that's what we are looking at. The seamlessness between CPU, QPU, and GPU is the vision we are building towards. And I am excited to say KPMG is joining our family as well. And to me, that's exciting because KPMG has an understanding of their client needs, understands AI, understands those modalities which are emerging right now. We understand quantum very well, and we are trying to build this bridge and figure out what brings value at the end of the day to the client in a way where we can be there when this materializes. So welcome KPMG to IBM Quantum Network. And if I leave you with 3 things today from this entire talk, here are my 3 things. Quantum computing is real. People are working on it. It is accelerating. The early adopters are investing, and it's not a pipeline, it's not theory anymore. We are making progress every single day on this. And we are not doing this alone. We are actually doing it with our ecosystem. And the barriers to the adoption are actually very low. You have things which are out there in open. You can start today, free stuff to start looking at quantum. And then, as it gets more sophisticated, we of course have the more sophisticated stuff for you to use as well. But you don't have to wait. You don't have to invest a lot. What you have to do is know that this is the future that is coming, and you just have to prepare for it and think about it from today. Because if you start thinking about it tomorrow, when you have these quantum computers at maturity, I'm sorry, you're going to be too late.